her collaboration with poets from diverse cultural and international backgrounds. That's resulted in 2 publications of poetry, a unique feature being that each poem is written and produced in the author's own language. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you so much for having me, Nora. It's such a wonderful opportunity to be supported by Radio Adelaide, so thank you so much.
Wonderful to have you. The first edition of The World in Our Words was described as a collaborative poetry anthology involving 24 contributors, and I understand a second edition of similar magnitude is imminent. Is that right?
Oh, it really is. So the first World in Our Words was published in 2024, and there was 24 poets, which was amazing. We had 5 different languages. And then this edition, which is the second edition of The World in Our Words, is being published on the 14th of March. So just around the corner.
Beautiful. Sounds wonderful. So what's your background and connection to poetry more generally, and specifically, what drove your involvement with The World in Our Words poetry?
Yeah, so I have always written. I come from a very low socioeconomic upbringing. So technically, in the eyes of the literary world, I shouldn't be a poet or an author or a writer, because that's kind of reserved for people that go to university and academics. And so for me, I've always written, and I actually left school not being able to read or write. I was really quite illiterate, and I had to train myself on how to read and write. And obviously now I could do that quite well. And so I've always written since I was able to, and I thought to myself a few years ago, I'd love to publish my own work. But I didn't have enough, and I'm very community orientated, and I very much like to give others opportunities, and I love to showcase them, and I love to uplift them. And so I kind of thought, well, why don't I just put a call out and see if anyone else wants to be published? And so I did that, and I did that through Facebook, and I had an overwhelming response. And I thought, okay, here we go. It's happening. And I was traveling at the time, and I thought to myself, oh, people will forget about this, and it won't come to fruition. And fortunately, my friends definitely made sure that this was at the forefront of their minds and was following up. And so from that, I realized, okay, this is really important. This is something that I need to do. And at that point, I was in the process of publishing my other book. And so I was like, well, I'll just use the knowledge of publishing that book to publish this. And so that's kind of how The World in Our Words was birthed in one way, was to give others opportunities and to also be inclusive, because even back in 2023, 2024, we were seeing a shift from community and unity to more segregation and individuals. And I think it's a complex issue. And so for me, I was really struggling with where the world was heading at that time. And so I thought to myself, do you know what? I'm going to open this up to all languages. And I remember when I said that to an older poet, he turned around to me and said, you will not sell one copy if it is not all in English. And I thought, I don't care, because this is to show the world that we can come together, and that it's not just about English language, that poetry can be written in all dialects, in all cultures, and that should be celebrated. And so
raises a really interesting point, doesn't it? Because a unique feature of your publications, as I understand it, is that each poem is written in the poet's own language.
Yeah.
So how did you've talked a little bit about how your concerns about the world and divisiveness and bringing people together drove you to see the ways in which poetry could be a tool for uniting people. but the idea of producing poems in diverse languages is very intriguing. So how did you problem solve
that? That's a great question. So this was my way of telling the world that we can celebrate all dialects, celebrate all languages, but it was also my way of saying that we can unify through word. So in the first edition, we had Portuguese, we had Spanish, we had Vietnamese, we had Hebrew, and I think that was it, and then English. And so I was lucky enough, one of the poets, so this is the thing, right? Poets are amazing. They're incredible. And so one of the poets, she didn't know how to translate into English, right? And so she went to her Australian neighbour who lived down the road, and they worked together to translate her poetry from Hebrew into English, right? So that's the dedication. Like, and in one way, would Australians go and work with like Spanish people to translate their poem? You know what I mean? Like, it shows a true like humanity in one way that, you know, she's like, yeah, this is my language, but I also want to give this opportunity to English reading people to read it. So it was actually a beautiful thing to experience. But with the World in Our Words 2, we currently have, what languages have we got in this one? So we have, oh my God, I'm trying to think of, it's Moroccan, but it's, the language in Morocco is, because it's here, I can see it. Anyway, it's Moroccan. So there's a Moroccan which they were very, very, very kind to translate it from their dialect from Morocco into English. We also have Polish as well, which is wonderful. So we have a Polish poet who lives in Canada, but she also translated her work into English. And so they're the only two languages, I think, in this one. But we've been very lucky in both editions that they have translated all of them. I think there's maybe one or two poems in the whole book which isn't translated into English. But otherwise, they've just been like wonderful in many ways. And I think it's great because it pushes the boundaries about even us, right? Even English-speaking people to read, like just to see what another language looks like. I think there's something really beautiful about being open to that.
So my follow-up question there was about what might be or what were some of the challenges or rewards from adopting that approach of each poet writing a poem in their own particular language. So translation obviously was a challenge.
Yeah.
Are there things that you might do differently, or are there some reflections that you'd like to share?
Yeah, so it's a bit hard when it comes to editing, I have to admit, because the people that are editing the book are English speakers. So, you know, we have to work with the poet when it comes to editing to just be like, you know, do you know someone that could edit it, or are you happy to, you know, I'm happy to edit the English ones, but the you know, the Polish poems, I can't understand. Do you know what I mean? So that is a handicap in many ways, but we have workarounds, if that makes sense. We have I think the hardest thing when it comes to dialect is there's such a tradition, right? And it's a beautiful thing, right? In every kind of area of life, there's traditions. And what I'm doing is I'm pushing that tradition because I'm going, well, we don't have to just have English poems. We don't have to just have English on the paper. We can have different dialects. We can have Portuguese. We can have Spanish. We can have Hebrew. We can have Polish. You know, like I'm pushing the concepts and traditions that it's only this way. And through that, what happens is that you have a transition period. So I'm kind of the first person to publish in different languages. I'm the first person, I think, or maybe the second to divvy up all the royalties and pay it to the poet. So these things are not normal within the poetry world, right? They're not normal in anthologies. And so what I'm doing is I'm actually shaking up the industry, and I'm going, you know what, we can actually do this. We can publish in different languages. It can be purchased. It can be supported. You know, like I'm down to the last 5 books at the moment. Like the guy that said that I was never going to sell a book, oh my God, I wish he was here today, because I was just like, we're down to the last 5 copies. And I'm like, that's amazing. Do you know what I mean? So there's clearly support there. It's just, you know, having the space to transition into a new way of doing things.
And you're working from this community level. So that's an interesting aspect of what you're doing. And I think you're talking about how publications of writing of any sort of authors is very much controlled by a top-down approach, perhaps by corporations. And so one of my next questions, and I'm going to have to, I just saw that I'm running out of time, and I'm wondering if I can extend it. I can edit this out. I've just gone to my calendar. Can you hear me, Stephanie?
Yeah.
I'm just going to see the poets. Did you find, we've been talking about the challenges around each poet producing their work in their own particular language and the translation of that into English. With the poetry itself, did you find differences or similarities in the themes or emphasis of different poets' contributions? And more generally, what would you say to a reader would be some of the unexpected highlights they could find in the poetry?
Yeah, so it's interesting because from the first edition to the second, I feel like the poets have walked into their power a lot more. And like there's some from the first book, but there's a lot of new ones. So there's 35 poets in this one. And I think there might be about 7 from the first edition. And I think that a lot, like even the poets that are new poets coming into this anthology, they're just walking into their power a lot more. If that makes it, like the quality of applicants that submitted their work, so high. Like I was just like, wow, like we are, you know, we really are on the precipice of the next generation of incredible poets. So what is something that the reader will feel? They're going to sit there, they're going to read this anthology, and it's going to hit their heart, and then it's going to hit their mind, and it's going to force them to stop. And what I mean by that is poetry is an amazing way to connect to the soul. And the poets in this book have that. There is so many of them. Like, that's why there's 35, because we couldn't narrow it down, because we were like, there is just so many incredible poets. Like, and we have poets that are 14, 15, 16 years of age, all the way up to 70. Right? And everywhere in between, in their 20s, 30s, like it is truly diverse, right? And I think that's it. It's striking. These pieces in this book force the reader to stop and have a moment, right? And to connect with the words, but also to connect with themselves. So I think that's the takeaway of this book. Now, I also have a beautiful thing where I'm like, if you want to talk about politics, go for it. If you want to talk about something that is, you know, that other anthologies refuse to allow to allow or publish, I'm like, bring it on in. This is the poetry book for you. Because for me, it's cultural. How do we develop as a race? We develop by a race, by our environment. And if we don't allow these voices to have a place to be read, then how are we going to have the thought-provoking moments that we all need to kind of develop internally? So I think that this is what this book is. There is, heartache, there is reflection on self, there is reflection on development, there is reflection on humanity, there is reflection on what period we are going through. Like we have a Nigerian man, Abu, and he is, oh my God, I can't wait for everybody to read his. Honest to God, I read his and it just puts it into perspective. Right? You read his, because each poet has like a write-up before they go into their poems. Then you read his work. Oh my God, like it was just overwhelming. And, you know, like there's a woman called Jacqueline, right? She's no longer with us, because that's the other thing. I publish people's work that they might not still be alive, but their dying wish was to have their poetry published, right? And Jacqueline Lewin she's an English woman, and she migrated to Australia, and unfortunately died through domestic violence. And so her daughter has all of her work, and she was in the first one, she's in the second one. And her work is so powerful. You know, her work is so powerful. I'm so overwhelmingly happy that I get to share this with people, that I get to go, you know what, this woman existed and her words were powerful, 20, 30 years ago. And now I get to share it with so many people all over the world. So yeah, this is the most diverse book that you'll probably come across in a long time.
On another level, renowned Irish author Colin Toibin, visiting Australia in 2025, explained that in Ireland, writers benefit from government support that pays a living wage to eligible artists. And he proffered that if there isn't a version of this sort of thing in Australia, well, he thinks there should be. Because he says we don't want to see poets hungry or looking miserable on the streets. What say you about the Australian government's financial and other supports for poets, and in particular?
Oh, thank you for asking this. So I'm very vocal about this. So I live in Melbourne at the moment, and they've just, the government here has just cut all funding to Creative Victoria, to the Literary Melbourne Fund, the Victorian Melbourne Fund. We don't have anything. It's gone. It's sayonara. And, it comes like a bit of sweetness for me. Colin is correct. These organisations that exist in Australia, that have funding, should not hoard, and they should not be profit-based. And I read an article recently where it was like, well, we turned Writer Victoria into a profitable organisation. And I'm like, that it should not be the basis of these institutions. These institutions should essentially support, but also nourish poets and writers. And what does that mean? Right, I'm unemployed. I do this out of the goodness of my heart. I don't get paid for this. I do not get paid to publish these books. I give all the profits back to the poet, right? But I know that I would do so much more writing. I would develop more. I would write more poetry. I would contribute more to my community, my writer, but also my broader community, if I actually had financial support. And so these institutions are geared to be built in a way where they're profit driven, that they charge people for things. And it's like, that's not what this is about. You cannot put a price on creativity. You cannot put a price on poetry. You cannot put a price on writing as a writer, right? Like you have all of the works that people read and absorb, they have there is no way to financially put what that changes in a human being, how that changes in a society. So yeah, he's correct. We should have a flourishing, supportive writing and poetry community where poets and writers are not taking the scraps of society, because that's how this is all geared up. And that's why I wanted to make sure that the profits of this book go back to the poets, because it's like someone had to make a change. Someone had to stand up and go, we shouldn't just be taking poetry and publishing it and taking the profits. Someone had to do it. And yet, have I got flack for doing this? 100%, but not by the poets, because the poets are valued. That one thing means that I go, you are valued. Your creativity and and how you write is valued, and someone has to shift the industry. But on a broader scale, when we talk about government, man, they need a massive shake-up. So that's why it's bittersweet. It's just like, yes, they've cut all the funding in Melbourne. We don't have a literary agent anymore, but were they actually supporting writers and poets? Were they making sure that we were flourishing? Were they contributing? No, they weren't. So we have to reflect on, okay, it's sad that they're gone, but we need to reflect on what we have in society, and is that the best fit, and how should we go forward, and how should we support our writers, because we have an absolutely dramatic way of impact in this world. If you remove writers and poets and musicians and creatives from the world, you're going to have a very bland world.
Well, that brings me to my next question. So, in promoting the benefits of poetry and working collaboratively with diverse international poets, you've previously talked about the role that poetry plays in promoting and presumably achieving or strengthening equality. Can you give a concrete sense or give us a picture of how poetry is important to the creation of equality in society?
Yeah, definitely. So poetry has been around, I think, from the 1500s. And when you think about that, right, we're in 2026. That's a long time to have had poetry in the world, to have had masters and people from all walks of life to have created it. And like, my favorite poem is called If, and it is about it was written in the trenches of World War II, right? And I, like, this poem will always stay close to my heart because it is kind of almost like a beacon to me, right? It is a reflection of humanity. It's a reflection of our values, of how we walk in life. It is a reflection of what we stand for and our camaraderie of the people next to us. So what is equality? And how do we achieve equality if we don't have these poems that impact us, that stay with us for life, that are kind of that beacon that no matter where we are in the world, no matter what we're doing, we're always brought back to that solitude of those words, because they bring us in and they go, okay, well, you know, am I doing a good job today? Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. But like, there is power in the words that we have. Now, how do we build equality from that? We are being censored. We are being censored across the world. And poetry is the consciousness of the mind put into words, right? It is a reflection of the world that poet is living in. And if we do not have poets reflecting what we are living in right now and talking about the depths of despair and how angry we are that they're taking away our jobs and our money and our living standards, and, you know, how are we ever going to go forward to achieve equality if we don't have people being able to express it and plant those seeds? Like, it's one and another, right? You can't have one without the other. It sounds like you're making a strong connection between poetry and perhaps people being able to connect to each other as human beings. And you said earlier that poetry, you think, shows people's souls and helps people access what's in people's souls, what's in people's hearts. So is it about that shared humanity, and does that help us create a better, more equal society? Yeah, it does, definitely. 100% it does. But I also think that this book, The World in Our Words too, is the way that it's run, right? Everybody contributes to it. So we all volunteer our skills. We also open it up to the world. We also open it up to different dialects. We also ensure that the profits are divvied up equally. All of these things are based on equality, yeah? And I'm not sure if everyone has put that together, but this book is a representation of what we can do on a larger scale. And so when I first published The World in Our Words, I organized it in a socialist way, because that's what I'm doing. Socialism is not a palatable word. And I wanted to show through action that you can do things a different way. You can ensure that equality is brought in. So yes, when we're talking about poetry and how the poet exists, yes, but on the flip side, the way that I created this book was on a completely equal playing field. So everybody had a leg up. So if we're going to talk about equality, this book embodies it in the way that it is published, in the way that it has been created, in the way that I have included all languages and royalties are split, right? So but there has to be someone that goes, can it be done? Yes, it can be. Are we able to now go up to the next level? It's, you know what I mean? Like, this is the pilot to show others you can do anything when it comes to equality, but you have to put action to it. You have to show the world that it can be done. And that's how I do it. I influence in beautiful ways, in many ways. And that's how this book has been created.
Okay. Another question.
Yes.
Is there fun and music in poetry? And if you think so, what does that look like or sound like for you?
Yes, I do think so. So I collaborate very closely with a Canadian woman called Sherry Platomi, and she is amazing. You should look her up. And so we write together. So we send each other work. So I'll either send her work and she'll send me work, and we work together on it, right? And she's a musician. So they're like, all you really need sometimes when it comes to poetry is a tune. And sometimes that tune comes when you write the poetry. So you can go from one to the other. It's like the tide, right? It comes in and out. And especially with poetry, it's like one of it's the same thing essentially. It's just got music to it. But yeah, so I definitely think that poetry, you've got your, and you know, essentially with spoken word, that is another form, right? So it's the sound element. So yes, you've got music, you can use poetry and music, you can get up and you can speak and perform in spoken word. Like, that's the beauty. It can be transferred into all these other areas, and I think that's what I love about it.
Finally, what do you believe can happen when poets across the world collaborate or join forces?
Anything. Absolutely anything. And I think The World in Our Words shows us, this is the second edition, you know, I've got this book shows that anything is possible. I got essentially 50 poets to put down their political views, their religion, their cultural elements. I got everybody to put all of that down, their ideologies. 6 months, I've got them to put that down, to come together and to work together. This book represents the unity of the world. Like, we can do anything, and this is only the beginning. And I suppose that's why it is such a celebration for me, because I'm showing people, I'm like, this is amazing. Like, this is actually really special, not only in Australia, but all around the world. You know, by the end, if I do a third edition, I reckon I'll probably have maybe 3/4 of the globe that it will be published in it. Like, that's a pretty cool thing to say. So I think that anything is possible when you come together and you operate from a transparent and honest way. Because, I have been very transparent with all the poets. I'm very, very loyal, and I always uplift. Like, my whole thing is uplifting and giving people opportunities, and I always do. So anything is possible.
Well, thank you, Stephanie. That seems to have come full circle, because we started this interview with you talking to us about your background, and you described yourself as coming from a background that was, I think you described it as a lower socio-economic background. And I think coming from that background, it's not surprising that opportunity would be at the centre of your focus and the centre of the things that you want to achieve in the world. And so that's where we've come at the end of the interview, talking once again about uplifting and about opportunity and what opportunities can provide. So thank you, Stephanie. The World in Our Words sounds like a very rich and intriguing collaboration. All the best. And you can find out more about this collaborative endeavour by visiting www.mrsrowe.org. That's mrsrowe.org. Thank you, Stephanie.